Namaskaram. My name is Dharmamurthy. Um, I am a PhD student in chemistry, and I am interested in spirituality. I'm interested in science. I'm training to be a scientist, and I'm interested in where these two meet. I'm interested in navigating life's biggest questions, living them day to day, getting answers slowly, and really understanding, what are we here for? What is this life about? What is this, right? I've just been pleased here on this earth, and I'm spending day to day doing, God knows what. But that's neither here nor there. But essentially, what I wanted to do with this is I wanted to make a series of topics that I would like to talk about and give my thoughts on my experience. Um, in a way that I want to do this in a very inclusive way, in the sense that we're, combining a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different viewpoints, from spirituality, scientific, intellectual, materialistic, all of this. I want to talk about all of this. And we don't want to denounce anyone's viewpoint, but we want to investigate and see how people view life, and, how people choose to spend their time here on Earth. So that's my intention with this. So today it's the first topic, and the first topic I thought was best fitting was the topic of death. Now, this can be particularly a sensitive topic for many people, because everyone has experienced, or many people have, death in their lives, and it can shake you up a lot. But interestingly enough, it could be the case where it doesn't affect your life a lot for many reasons. Maybe you weren't close with the person, or it just didn't have a big impact on you, or it could impact you in an extremely profound way, where it could literally change the direction of your life. I chose this topic because death, in its essence, guides life, right? Because without the end that is inevitable, there's no decision that needs to be made in the present moment, because there's no end in mind, right? So because everything is going to go away one day, you have to decide, how am I going to spend the time that I have? Now, that is hard to acknowledge on a day-to-day basis, but it's one that has to be reckoned with. It has to be reckoned with, because this is how people live. That's how people live. When people get up and go to work every day, or get up and go to school, or get up and take care of their parents, or whatever, right? When they do all those things, it's with the subtle acknowledgement that, okay, I'm going to have to give up all of this one day. Whether you realize it or not, that's what you're doing when you get up every day and you go and do whatever, right? It's with the acknowledgement that you have to give it all up. It's going to go. So with that in mind, I wanted to start off just by acknowledging, first of all, this week in particular has been kind of interesting, or these past couple of days, because we've seen kind of death on the national level, with the death of Charlie Kirk, a political commentator. Regardless of what you think of his views, it was a brutal death. He was murdered in front of his family, and that's not to be taken lightly. And there's many videos online as well, and it's a tough thing to see, that's for sure. On the same day, a school shooting occurred, and these are, more commonplace. And this past week, Ricky Hatton, uh, a renowned boxer, he also passed away. So we've been seeing, you know, many occurrences at the big level. And this happens all the time, by the way. It's just people don't recognize it, right? You feel like every day somebody's died. Some actor, some movie star, somebody's aunt, somebody's mom, somebody's grandma, somebody's child, God forbid. But this is how it is. This is how it happens, right? You essentially you go through day to day, and every day it's somebody's time, right? So this is something that needs to be acknowledged, and this is something that needs to be addressed. Now, talk about a little about what is death, right? What is it, right? I've already said a little bit of what I feel it is, but everyone has their own perspective. Now, science is a little bit shaky on this, meaning that they don't really know what death is. Because there's this thing where you have a cessation of brain activity, right? And they say that's brain dead, and then you're dead. And then there's the heartbeat situation, but the heartbeat can also come back, right? You can artificially stimulate the heartbeat, right? And then there's the concept of, you know, um, people coming back to life. There's that whole thing. There have been, it's testimony, right? It's testimony, so it's not like medically documented and you can't be used in research outside of some interesting article per se. But at the heart of it, it's important, right? It's important because they cannot define exactly the point of where death occurs. This is a very difficult question to answer from a scientific perspective. That's interesting. Why? Because so much of the scientific enterprise is dedicated to stopping things that originate from death. Disease, right? Linked to death. Everything, medicines, right? So all of that is related to death, but death itself cannot be defined. I just find that it's interesting, right? It's an interesting kind of conundrum that scientists have to go through. Now, from kind of a yogic perspective, right? What is death? So there's a theory of human being, essentially, right? And I'm going through this kind of quickly. But from the yogic perspective, death is the cessation of two faculties, or rather two layers of human being. There are 5 layers of human being, right? There's the gross body, which is literally like the matter proportion of the body, the one that becomes dust, as the Bible says, which you return to, or ash if you choose to cremate. But either way, it's going to be, it's just a change of matter. Then there's the sort of energy body, right? The breath. The breath which kind of like sustains all the life energies that give the gross body its ability to do things and to work, right? To function properly. Then there's the mind, right? You notice that your mind is different from your body, or at least different from the sensations of your body, right? This is very, very obvious. But for some reason, because people say my body, right? My body, it's in my possession. It's tied to some entity, right? That I use as my, in the sense of I use the same thing for all of my possessions, right? My phone, right? I'm recording with my phone. My shirt, right? My mic, all of that, right? I use my. It's an entity, but I also ascribe my body to it. So that already brings the distinction between you and your body, right? So there's the mind, right? Then there's the 4th level, where that is what is beyond your mind, right? Now we're getting beyond your mind, and we don't know what is there, but if you notice, the level of your mind, it comes from somewhere. It comes from somewhere, right? It cannot be created out of thin air. A thought comes from somewhere, right? An attraction comes from somewhere. Repulsion comes from somewhere, right? These all come from somewhere, right? They're not, uncreated things in the mind. They can come from, what's called the subconscious, typically psychologically. But this is essentially the next level above the mind, which is the subconscious, broadly speaking. So far, we got the gross body, the breath, the life energies. We've got the level of the mind, the gross mind. Then we have what is beyond the mind, directly beyond the mind. We're talking about subconscious. And at the top, it's called the realm of pure bliss, where the mind has been reduced to an empty vessel, and that is supposed to be filled with pure bliss, the realm of pure bliss. Now, granted, this is a theory, right? I don't know, maybe some spiritual people don't like to recognize this, but this is a theory, right? This is not, it's validated by direct perception, right? And granted, many people have given their testimonies, but it's testimony based. You cannot, I cannot show you evidence for this, right? Outside of any first person experience that I might have. But to actually ask for evidence for this is a little bit silly, because we're talking about something that is beyond the senses, right? So to show you evidence, I have to play to your senses. Right? How can I show you something that's beyond the mind with something that can be verified by your senses? It's a silly question. But that's neither here nor there. But anyways, so coming back to the topic at hand, death. What we're talking about is death is the cessation of the first three activities, meaning obviously the gross body is gone, right? That become dust, right? The second is the life breath. Life breath is going to go because you no longer breathing, right? It's a pretty typical indication of someone dying. Third thing is the mind activity. Mind activity ceases, right? And yogic theory would also suggest that the subtle impressions that you have made over the course of your lifetime, or lifetimes, let's say, but we don't have to talk about that yet, will also be taken with you, right? So it's these levels, these essence of being, but that there is something about you that is untouched in the process of death, and that's associated with some kind of bliss, let's say. So we have these kinds of layers of human being, let's say, and one is untouched, and the others are seized at the point of death, and let's say carried on in some way. That's vague, but I can flesh it out at another point. So we have one instance where you can kind of define death in sort of first-person experience way, and the other side, the scientific side, cannot verify death through any means of the senses. Okay, so we have these two kind of perspectives. There are many more, but this is, broadly speaking, a spiritual and a scientific perspective. Right? Science can't really do much about this because there's not much outside of the senses that can verify the processes of death, because it's a complex thing, right? And I haven't even talked about people going brain dead and having crazy experiences, coming back to life and recounting them. Where did that come from? God knows. But it's kind of a spiritual and scientific perspective. Now, I want to touch briefly on what is the spiritual meaning of death, or the meaning for anybody, right? Spiritual or not, when you have to die, what are you going to do about it? This is the question of life. The body will die. The mind will end, right? Breath will end. Something else might end. Don't know. But these are from your waking experience. These will all end. And everything associated with it. Possessions, wealth, family, friends, job, pleasures, everything. It all end. Because it's all temporary, right? It has to end. So if that's the case, what are you going to do on a day-to-day basis? Are you going to live? How are you going to live? What are you going to do? This is the question that everyone needs to answer. And I will give two examples, right? Two examples from some spiritual sources on what people did when they were confronted with this question. The first one is Gautama Buddha. I feel like if you talk about death, you have to talk about Gautama Buddha, because his is such a profound story. If you don't know his story, briefly speaking, he was a king. He grew up in a kingly household. He was a prince. He was the heir apparent. And one day a kind of astrologer person came and said, "Hey, Buddha," or he talked to his father, the king at the time, and he said, "Your son may be industrious king. He could take over all other nations. He will be an extraordinary king, or he will be a wise sage, a person of enlightenment, you could say. And the king was like, screw that. I don't want my kid to be some wandering person. I want him to be like, the greatest king ever, which is a reasonable expectation. If many parents want the best for their kids. So he said, all right, from now on, I am not letting my son leave. He's going to stay here in the kingdom, and he's just going to be exposed to what I want him to be exposed to. And that played out, right? But when, as Buddha went through his, childhood and teenage years, he wanted to do something, right? He wanted to get out. He said, there's this whole stuff out there. What's out there? And so, he asked his father, and his father agreed, and everything was arranged. But the father told the charioteer, only show him what I want him to see, right? So they had like a specific route that the Buddha had to go through, or at this point, Siddhartha Gautama, he had to go through. And, this was all supposed to be the nice things, the nice parts of life, and, beautiful sceneries and whatnot, whatever. So Siddhartha Gautama went out with the charioteer to see what the heck was in this one. And he saw the nice parts, and I'm really paraphrasing here. But at some point, he ran into somebody who was sick and dying. And notice there's kind of interesting symbolism with this story, because no matter what nice things, pleasurable things you purposefully expose yourself to, or are exposed to naturally based on whatever situation you're in, it's inevitable. You will have to face this reality. Many people don't want to. It's hard. It's a difficult reality to face with. I don't want to face this reality because it's extremely challenging to your current state of things, right? But it's inevitable. You have to deal with it. You might deal with it in the moment before death. That's a very real possibility, right? You might deal with it then. You could deal with it now, or you could deal with it in 10 years from now. You may not be here 10 years from now, but you could do it then. So Siddhartha Gautama saw this sick and dying person. Or he saw a sick person first. They saw a dead person after. He asked the charioteer, what is this? Who is this person? The charioteer answered honestly. He said, this person is sick. He's ailing. He's dying. And Siddhartha Gautama asked, is that going to happen to me? And the charioteer said, yes, it'll happen to you eventually. It's the natural process of life. And then when he saw the dead person, Siddhartha Gautama asked, what is this lifeless thing? The charioteer said, that's a dead person. And Gautama asked again, will that happen to me? And charioteer said yes. This completely shook the world of Siddhartha Gautama. He left everything. And we all know how this plays out, right? He eventually finds the so-called middle path, and he himself realizes himself and becomes the Buddha, the enlightened one. But he turned his back on all of the riches and the pleasures of the world. That was his response to death. I mean, it hit him so strongly that he just said, forget this. This is all temporary. This is all nonsense. I have to find out what life is really about. It's not as if everyone has to have this realization and give up everything tomorrow. That's not the point of this story. The point I'm trying to make is that reckoning with this concept at a really deep level can change your whole life's direction, if you truly give the weight that it should have. Now, there are many more complications to this, right? Because you're a human being. Right? You have desires. Right? You have desires that are temporary, right? This is just part of being a human being, like being a human being. So it's not, the point is not to just do whatever Buddha did and say, okay, forget this. No. But the point is, like I said, this is not a trivial question. This is the question of life, really. I wanted to give one more perspective, right? And this is from a book called The Imitation of Christ. It's written by a German Catholic monk. His name is Thomas Kempis. And he writes from a very monastic perspective. He writes from, well, obviously he's in the Catholic tradition. So honestly, these are like way different, right? You got Buddhist, like Buddha wasn't a Buddhist, but you have Eastern, right, tradition, and now you have Western tradition, essentially in the form of Catholicism. But I wanted to just read some excerpts of what is stated here in the 23rd chapter of this book, titled Thoughts on Death. So the first words are, very soon your life here will end. Yeah, that's great, that's wonderful. Today we live, tomorrow we die, and are quickly forgotten. Therefore, in every deed and every thought, act as though you were to die this very day. How do you know you will have a tomorrow? Blessed is he who keeps the moment of death ever before his eyes and prepares for it every day. In the morning consider that you may not live till evening, and when evening comes, do not dare to promise yourself the dawn. When the last moment arrives, you will begin to have a quite different opinion of the life that is now entirely past, and you will regret very much that you were so careless and remiss. The time will come when you will want just one day, just 1 hour in which to make amends, and do you know whether you will obtain it? Ah, foolish man, why do you plan to live long when you are not sure of living even a day? Death is the end of everyone, and the life of man quickly passes away like a shadow. Who will remember you when you are dead? Who will pray for you? And the conclusion here is, keep yourself as a stranger here on earth, a pilgrim, whom its affairs do not concern at all. This is some heavy-hitting stuff. But again, what he's saying is, it's imminent, it's very real, and it will completely change the direction of your life. If you keep death in your eyes in every single moment, which is a hard thing to do, but if you do that, you will see things as the way they are. You will not be clouded by things that ought not to overwhelm you and bring you in a direction where you don't want to go. So these are two perspectives. There's another perspective which I'll touch on briefly before the end of this video. But that being said, the third approach, kind of a non-contemplative approach, is to maximize the pleasures of your life. Now that's a very real perspective. People do it all the time, right? And most of it, and I'm not putting down this perspective, because everyone has an element to this in their life. You have a limited time. I have so much pleasure capabilities, right? I have dopamine receptors, I have serotonin receptors, I have all of these abilities and all of these sources and avenues of pleasure, right? How can I not experience some of it? So everyone has this kind of aspect of their lives where they say, okay, I have limited time, but I have certain pleasures that I want to experience. So some of my time should be devoted to experiencing pleasures, right? So But one of the genuine responses to that is, why can't all of life be like this? Right? If it's just start to finish, I'll just fill it up with as much pleasure as possible. Now, this can be taken as hedonism. It's not really hedonism or hedonism, however you say it, but it's a legitimate response to the question of death, right? And this will hit you in subtle ways, by the way. And we're talking about, like, if you're doing something, you're helping someone, but you feel pleasure in the sense that you're a great person. That's the same thing. It's not about going and drinking alcohol or having sex or sleeping around. That's not what I'm talking about here necessarily. It is very subtle. It can get you in many different ways. You feel pleasure from validation. You feel pleasure from many different things because it boosts the ego. That's the purpose of it, right? So it's subtle. It's not immediately obvious. It's not an externally, based thing that if I do all of these so-called pleasurable activities, then I'm living a materialistic pleasurable life. No. It's whatever gives you pleasure, right? That could be actually something that looks like a noble act. So, 3 different responses to life. Spiritual perspectives, 2 spiritual perspectives that highlight some things but differ in certain ways, and a kind of materialistic way of looking at life. But in reality, we're somewhere in the middle. Most people are. Most people recognize that you can't do pleasure all the time. Most people recognize you can't give everything up all the time. I would say most people are towards the pleasure end because it's easier. It's less dealing with the harsh realities of life. But by over time, I think in people's lives, as they experience more pleasure, they slowly move over to the other side. Some people are just born in this side, right? Like Gautama Buddha, you're just born and you say, okay, forget this, I'm leaving, I'm out, right? So some people are like that. Other people are like, okay, you know what? I need to have 5 more kids. There are people like that, right? And one comes to mind, Hugh Hefner. Right? Read about his life, what he did in the last years of his life. The point here is not condemnation, right? I'm trying to condemn this or condemn that. The point is they're both legitimate answers to this question. Right? And most people fall between these 2 extremes, let's say. But you have to question what is leading you in this direction. In the direction you're currently going, what is leading you there? You have to think about this. Right? Now, if you can sit here and earnestly say that I want to maximize pleasure, be honest about it. Because you have to do that, right? You owe it to yourself as a human being who has an end. To be honest, if you are honest about this side, right? I don't seek pleasure in things. I seek pleasure in nothing, you can say, as the Buddha did, and be honest about that. Do not do this thinking you are here, or do this thinking you are here, or do this with intentions here. That'll mess you up, man. It'll totally mess you up because you are living a fragmented nonsense, right? You're essentially a two-face. No good can come of that, trust me. But just be honest and think. This is from my experience. So that's really all I wanted to talk about, are these questions. If you have any thoughts, let me know. I want this to be a discussion. Thank you all, and I'll see you guys for the next topic. Namaskar.